My name is Justin B, and at a very young age, I was into dancing and was always comfortable with my body. My name made me recall that most of my baby pictures were always me being naked or wearing very little clothes. I believe it was because I have always been running warmer and wanted to be comfortable. Growing up, this made me at ease with myself and my body, and I have always been comfortable with girls. I was 7 years old and most of my friends were girls because they thought I was funny and entertaining. When I became a teenager, I took hip-hop dancing lessons and became good at moving my body. This has naturally got me to be in contact with people who offered me all sorts of gigs. When I turned 18, I met a guy named Andrew, and he made me aware of the possibility of becoming a male stripper. He was one himself and was working the club scene in Montreal. He invited me to a rehearsal to meet some of his guys from the crew and see what it was all about. And there I was, hooked and amazed about this whole secret industry. I started working at the clubs right away since I was good enough and fit enough for them to allow me to have a job. The easy cash, the women's attention, the partying, the crazy after-parties, and the crew made me want to do more and more. A Stripper's Story is my short story about my upbringing. I was raised by a single mother and had one sister. I never knew my dad since he bailed on my mom the moment she got pregnant with me. We were poor and my mom always had to work double jobs to afford the basic necessities of life for my sister and me. When I started working, especially after I became a stripper, I was giving a lot of money to my mom. She never really asked where it was coming from, as she thought it might have been drug money or something else. One day I sat with her and I remember I was 22 years old. I told her I was a stripper and enjoyed doing shows and entertaining the crowd. She didn't seem surprised and said, "I knew you could do something like that with your dancing skills and entertaining moves." She said that she didn't care as long as I wouldn't fall into drugs and addictions. I promised her I wouldn't, and to this day I always made sure not to follow guys into this lifestyle of doing drugs and drinking prior to a big night at the club.
In the single quote 80s, as many as 900 women a night would press into Chippendale's Upper East Side club and chant, "We want meat. We want meat." The oiled, muscled dancers would comply, stripping down on stage before venturing through the audience to kiss customers and accept dollar bills in their G-string pouches. The podcast Welcome to Your Fantasy, dropping Wednesday, digs into the wild history of the review. Host and co-producer Natalia Peterzella told the Post, "It was forbidden for dancers to take money for sex, but some did. I heard of guys making $300 to $1,500 for encounters." As ex-dancer Scott Marlowe reveals in the podcast, a woman once told him, "I'll give you $100 for every inch of cocaine I can snort off of your CK." But all that paled beside what went down between Soman Steve Banerjee and Nick DiNoia. The former launched Chippendales in 1979 at a Los Angeles bar. The latter turned it into a global phenomenon. By the 1990s, the business would be plagued by murder, arson attempts, and an FBI investigation. Inside the Chippendales murders and the horrific crimes of Steve Banerjee. Chippendales founder Steve Banerjee was dangerously obsessed with protecting the success of his male stripper troupe, and turned to murder and arson in order to do so. Chippendales is best known for its muscular male dancers, exuberant crowds of women, and dynamic shows. But the Chippendales murders proved that the light-hearted franchise had a dark side. In the 1980s and 1990s, Chippendales founder Steve Banerjee plotted multiple deaths. He orchestrated the murder of his business partner, set out to kill his rivals, and firebombed his competition. Though Banerjee was eventually caught, his suicide before his sentencing brought a shocking end to the story of the Chippendales murders. How Steve Banerjee started Chippendales. In 1975, an Indian immigrant named Soman Steve Banerjee bought a struggling Los Angeles bar called Destiny 2. He renamed it Chippendales and sought to jumpstart its reputation in the City of Angels. Though Banerjee was soft-spoken, he wanted Chippendales to be loud and fun. He took the advice of promoter Paul Snyder and started a male exotic dance night for ladies only in 1979. At first, All the guys were worried about her image, Banerjee recalled. But the show delighted female customers, who soon lined up to get in. It was the first time ever where something was completely geared to the ladies, explained Candace Mayron, the former associate producer for Chippendales. We built an environment for women to let it all hang out. But as Chippendales expanded, Banerjee became dangerously obsessed with protecting its success, even if it meant resorting to violence. In 1979, he quietly sent someone to burn down Moody's Disco, a rival nightclub. And in 1984, he tried to do the same at the Red Onion restaurant and bar. Meanwhile, Banerjee had started working with New York-based producer and choreographer Nick DiNoia to expand Chippendales' business. But Banerjee and DiNoia butted heads. According to Reed Scott, a Chippendales dancer, they used to go toe-to-toe and just scream and curse at each other. Banerjee envied DiNoia's creativity and charisma. He also resented that people had started referring to DiNoia, and not Banerjee, as Mr. Chippendales. And though he and DiNoia had made a deal on a napkin that gave DiNoia 50% of the profits from Chippendales tours, Banerjee began to suspect that DiNoia was shortchanging him. In 1987, Steve Banerjee decided he'd take care of Nick DiNoia for good. That year, the Chippendales murders began in earnest. Inside the Chippendales murders, on April 7, 1987, a gunman walked into Nick DiNoia's 15th floor New York office and shot him in the left cheek. DiNoia died, and many at Chippendales suspected they knew who was behind the hit. "I'm going to kill that mother," Steve Banerjee, one of the dancers, told Mayron. As for Mayron, she also thought that Banerjee was guilty. She wrote, "There wasn't a scintilla of doubt in my mind that it was Steve either." Indeed, Steve Banerjee had orchestrated DiNoia's murder. The FBI eventually pieced together that Banerjee had hired a man named Ray Colin to kill DiNoia. Colin, in turn, enlisted the services of Gilberto Rivera Lopez. Ultimately, Lopez had been the one to shoot Banerjee's rifle. The story of the Chippendales murders might have ended there. But despite rumors, nothing linked Banerjee to the scene. He remained free, and even bought back the Chippendales touring rights from DiNoia's family. But Banerjee continued to ruthlessly protect the franchise that he had built. In 1991, he hired Colin again. This time, Banerjee wanted him to go to England and kill a number of former Chippendales employees, including Scott, who'd left Chippendales for a rival troupe called Adonis. Just like with the murder of DiNoia, Colin enlisted a hitman to get the job done. But the hitman, known only as Strawberry, got cold feet and decided to reach out to the FBI. He explained to the agents that Colin had given him cyanide, a list of names, and instructions to go to England. Any agent? Whether you're straight out of the academy or whether you're a 25-year agent, this is the kind of case you want to get involved in, recalled FBI Special Agent Scott Garriola, who investigated the Chippendales murders. Garriola explained, "Not only did we have this conspiracy to kill people over in London, but we have a murder which actually occurred in New York in 1987. We have 2 arsons we have to investigate, and this conspiracy extended from the mid-70s all the way up until 1991. The FBI searched Colin's house and found enough cyanide to kill 230 people. And Colin, after stewing in jail for 7 months, finally agreed to help authorities solve the Chippendales murders. All roads, he said, led to Steve Banerjee. How the Chippendales murders ended. Over the next several months, the FBI tried to use Ray Colin to get Steve Banerjee to confess on tape. But Banerjee proved difficult to pin down. When the two men met on June 23, 1992, in a hot bathroom, Banerjee refused to say anything out loud. When Colin asked him questions, Banerjee only wrote his answers down on post-it notes. He then tore the notes up and threw them in the toilet, flushing them down the drain. Banerjee even demanded that Colin strip down to prove that he didn't have a wiretap. Colin did, but he managed to conceal it in the flap of his underwear. Still, authorities got nowhere in their investigation. We don't capture anything on a recording device, Gariola explained. There's a lot of rustling, and you could hear whisper talking. You could hear scratching of a pencil. You just can't hear anything of value. Undeterred, the FBI decided to try again. They had convinced Banerjee that he was a fugitive on the run. Banerjee apparently bought the story, and agreed to meet with him in Zurich, Switzerland. This time, with agents listening through a wall, Banerjee was more forthcoming. We hear Banerjee confess to his complicity in hiring Ray Colin for the murder of Benoya. They talk about the attempted murders of Reed Scott and other dancers, Gariola said. We were able to get the evidence that we needed. In September 1993, the FBI arrested Banerjee. The Chippendales founder was then charged with hiring a hitman to kill the former dancers, with Benoya's murder, and with violating the Federal Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act through murder, murder for hire, solicitation to commit murder, and arson. He faced 26 years in prison. But on the day before Banerjee's sentencing, October 23, 1994, the Chippendales murder case took one final shocking twist. There was no way I was going to miss Steve's sentencing, recalled Maron. I was on the courthouse steps with our Mick and two of our dancers, when someone came out and said there would be no hearing, because Steve had killed himself in jail the night before. I felt cheated, big time. Steve Banerjee had hanged himself in his prison cell, having allegedly said that he'd leave the country or kill himself rather than go to prison. Mr. Banerjee tied a piece of bedsheet around his neck, placed it on a wall-mounted jacket hanger, and pulled down on it while he kneeled, causing the flow of air to be cut off. That caused his death, explained Renard McFadden, the executive to the warden at the detention center. His suicide marked a stunning conclusion to the Chippendales murder saga. It also highlighted a shocking truth, that Chippendales, a franchise based on fun, sex, and dancing, had its roots in arson, betrayal, and murder.